Okay, question regarding Sanchin and weight distribution in our stance. It's been said that when you come to Yoi, the weight transfers into the balls of the feet. So there's a shift from midfoot to the front of the foot. This is somewhat unique to the Jundokan methods, OGKF methods, even Gojukai, I think, still uses the old style Yoi, but the Yoi in which we come straight from this closed hand position. It doesn't necessarily apply to where we open out here. This one is more 50-50. So again, we see a slight difference in intention in what Miyagi was teaching into later life. Now, when we look at Sanchin, first thing we do when we come from Yoi is this double hand cover up. Now, for me, this represents the flinch response. This represents this oh shit moment whereby we cover up, shrink our body a little bit in order to, you know, make the most of our natural body responses. What usually happens when we get a flinch response is that we shrink back. We will withdraw a little bit. We will move away. In other words, our weight will go into our heels rather than the balls of the feet. What Miyagi Sensei was advising was that we move forward boldly. We take our weight forward and we move into the threat. We sometimes try to think of suffocating it somewhat, right? Taking the power out from the source. So you could think of it in terms of we're trying to move away from our natural bodily responses and make it something a little bit more offensive, something that is a little bit more proactive in terms of shutting down the opponent, as opposed to being on the back foot straight away where our weight is now transferring into my heels, and now it's very hard for me to come forward. Something I used to do whenever was in, so you have different stages in conflict, right? So we have what's called the interview stage. The interview stage is whereby we're having this discussion. The discussions get heated, but it's not yet gone physical. We know it's going to get physical, but it hasn't yet. During this interview stage, I would always make a point of trying to be on the balls of my feet. I wouldn't be flat-footed, and I certainly wouldn't have my weight on my heels, because I know as something happens, I'm gonna have to move forward. I'm gonna have to shut down that threat as quick as possible. I don't wanna be caught on guard and then running back on my heels to try and get away from the situation, right? So if we think of it in terms of that with regard to the Yoi position, it's just a reminder, get on your toes so that you have options to move. Again, if we look at our kata, majority of our kata are moving forward. You know, if we look, probably the only exception really being Seipai. The rest, if we look at Saifa, we're moving forward. Seiyunchin, we're moving forward. Seisan, Supalempe, Shisochin, all these other kata. Kulunfa, we're offlining. So the only two exceptions we have is our Seipai and Kulunfa. Rest of the time, we're moving forward. So in terms of that, we're preparing for action, be it shutting down, be it offline, get out of range, right? Now, when we look at, in terms of power generation, if I'm upright, when I hit, my power is dispersed backwards, right? In order to make my strikes more powerful, I need to add weight. Not just my arm, not just the force, not just the rotation or striking as such. I need to add weight. I need to generate force and drop that shot in. So when we look at hitting, there's a transfer of energy again into the front of my feet in the same way we just spoke about with Yoi. I want that weight transferring forward. When I hit, I want that weight transferring forward, okay? When we look at our legs, we have muscles that are designed for the go, and we have muscles that are designed for the slow. So what I mean by that, our muscles for the go, if I look at running, it's this hip extension. It's my glutes, it's my hamstring. There's a bit of quad drive, but primarily I'm looking at posterior chain. When I want to slow, I now use my quads in order to decelerate the position. So now my weight is now transferring into the front leg. So when I hit, if we think of it in terms of Sanchin, if we think of it in terms of Shime, when I get Shime, I want to connect my hands to the opponent and I want to make this front leg light. I want to float this. I don't want to drive this down, because in driving this down, I'm slowing my body and I'm in effect uprooting myself and pushing myself backwards. I want to allow that to float. So I can use a wall even to feel this. Put a wall here, put my hand on, and I want to feel connection between this leg and my target, or this hand being my frame, okay? So ideally, what I want to connect is my diagonal, my frame, my guard hand, to my rear leg. I want to make this one light so that my pressure is here, my pressure is here, my pressure is here. I'll become a tripod, I allow this one to float. And that ensures my power is going forward. If I weight this one too much, if I exert too much force into this one, I will in effect push myself back, okay, depending upon the balance between these two. Without overthinking this process too much, just think about how we walk, because Sanchin in effect is just an extension of our natural walk. That's why it should be quite, you know, if we look at our stance, same distance as a walking pace, same width as a walking pace. Only difference being, we ground that position. We ground that position. But, in a sense, all we're doing is walking. If I look at the transfer of my body when I walk, I'm in effect stopping myself from falling over every time I step, right? If I step, there's a deceleration. You see, this leg becomes light, this leg becomes heavy, okay? We have a yin and a yang. So every time I step, I'm in effect just trying to stop myself from falling over. What we need to do is hit before that leg comes down. So from here, bang, that. I want that slightly before that. Bang, there. Bang, there, okay? At that point, that one was late. But at that point, all my weight is transferring into the target through my hand and is grounded into this rear leg, okay? Now, the thing is, you need to take this idea and you need to be able to feel it, but not necessarily show it. So that when I do my Sanchin, I'm not really driving this leg too much. All my intention is on this back leg. I'm gonna try and make it real overt and obvious here. So that as I punch, this happens. You see there's a whole, almost a growing of this rear leg. If I do to the front, there. And even this leg, you'll see it almost float a little bit on the hill, because what I'm trying to do is actually drive that hamstring as well. So I can get both legs projecting forward like a triangle, like a spear tip, okay? In terms of tendon alignment, often we're told head over your hips, right? I want that vertical spine all the time. You'll see some guys take that to the extreme. A lot of guys in RGKF, they have a real big pelvic tilt. Teruchi, for example, ends up really leaning back and almost the toes floating off the ground. That to me is the opposite of what we're talking about here. When I do my Sanchin, there is a very slight, maybe 1-2 degrees forward lean. Again, I want to add weight. I'm anticipating resistance against this punch. In order to overcome this resistance, I slightly lean into it. I want to drop. I want to fall into that, okay? So this front leg, in other words, is there just as a strut, just as to catch our balance. It's not necessarily pushing, it's not necessarily doing anything to add the force. If anything, I want it out the way. The only reason it's there is to stop me from falling into this void this way. But I want as little resistance stopping me from going forward as possible.